few things I want to bring to your attention here before we bring on today's first guest. That is that over at bangthebook.com, we've got a lot of great content going up over there on the daily. We've got so much going on, lots of really talented writers doing some very good stuff for us. I'm still doing my Major League Baseball picks and analysis here as we go throughout the playoffs. Also have a bunch of college football game previews up for the weeknight games here, plus I hit South Florida and Tulane. We've got other writers covering some college football stuff for us as well. And also we've got NFL game previews for every game that's on the card. Super Contest recap went up yesterday. I was 4-1 with my picks, 15-5 in the last 4 weeks, 17-13 here on the season as a whole. So you can read up on that over there at the website as well. But we've got golf coverage, NASCAR coverage will be coming out here later today. We've got some NBA stuff coming along here for you as well. So lots of things going on over at bangthebook.com, including our sportsbook reviews, our contest section. I talk about that all the time. Cash prizes available for the daily pick of, or the daily Stringer contest, monthly pick of the day, top monthly win percentage, top ROI, top number of units won. Tons of stuff going on with those contests over there at bangthebook.com. Something I want to bring to your attention here. Now, I'm not entirely sure that we have a lot of listeners that check this page out, but over there at bangthebook.com, in all of our specific sports sections, we have our matchup data section, and there's some very, very good stuff in that matchup data section for you to check out. So much going on over there. Lots of stats and trends, dating back well into the past. You got some more recent stuff as well. But those things over there at bangthebook.com are so valuable for you. When we talk about these lines, we talk about the efficiency of the odds makers and all that type of stuff. We're talking about looking for small edges. You have to try to turn small edges into a profit. And if you can find and uncover some kind of stat that you like or something that just really works out well for you, then do that. Whatever it may be, wherever you find that information, use it to your advantage. And that's something you can do with that matchup section over there at bangthebook.com. I'm looking at the NHL ones right now for tonight's 3-game card: Detroit, Toronto, Chicago, St. Louis, Montreal, Los Angeles. Lots of great stuff there. Offensive shooting percentage, defensive shooting percentage, power play and penalty killing percentage. So much stuff that can help you all in one easy-to-use area. It's just perfect for you. So if you haven't checked out that matchup data section over there at bangthebook.com, make sure that you do, because I guarantee you that area is going to have a lot of stuff that can really help you out. Speaking of the NHL, I also have my NHL situational betting article that goes up every Sunday over there at bangthebook.com, using the schedule to our handicapping advantage. I do the same thing for the NBA on Sundays as well. And, of course, we've got Parker Michaels' daily NHL picks. Those have been fantastic. Great write-ups on every game, talking about the process that he goes through. He's got a chart of lines where, when it's within a certain range, you should play it. Got his picks over there as well. We're just really proud of what we're doing over there at bangthebook.com. NFL Power Ratings will be coming out here tomorrow. We should have an updated college football futures piece from Lockie Lockerson, as well as an NFL futures piece later on in the week. So there's plenty of good stuff, and you want to make sure that you're getting as much information as possible. And we try to tailor that, obviously, to a betting focus with everything that we do. So if that is something that is important to you, and if you're listening to this show, it clearly is, head on over there to bangthebook.com. Check out all of the information that we have available for you. As you know, this edition of Bang the Book Radio and all editions of Bang the Book Radio are presented by DSI Sportsbook. If you sign up over at DSI using the promo code BTB and the number 25, you get a $25 free bet just for signing up. If you make that first deposit, you'll get a 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook and a 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well if you decide to play some of the games that they've got going on over there. So it's a really generous offer. As I mentioned before, a low rollover on that sportsbook bonus relative to the other offshores in the industry. So that's something you should give some consideration to here, because as you know, and we talk about this all the time on the show here, you want to have as many outs as possible. You want to be able to spread your bankroll over as many different sports books as you can, so you can shop around for the best prices on these games. So look at this Thursday night game here between Memphis and Houston. DSI, Houston's -3, -115. BetOnline -3, -110. 5 Dimes -3, +100. So even money there on Houston at -3. All of this stuff matters, the ability to go around and shave off 5 cents of juice, it's really significant. I mean, I understand that a lot of people probably look at it from the perspective of half points and full points and things of that sort, but the juice matters as well. And it may not seem like it, but again, the example that I like to use with that is, would you rather play 3-2 blackjack or 6-5 blackjack? No matter what table stakes you're playing at, you decrease the house edge if you're playing 3-2 as opposed to 6-5. So that's why it's important. That's why it's something you want to keep in mind here, not just throughout this season, but as you get into future seasons as well, because ideally you start making more money, you start showing more of a profit with your bankroll there, and you're able to adjust your bet size accordingly. And that 5 cent difference in juice, it may not be much right now, but in 2018 or 2019 or something like that, it's going to mean that much more to you as long as your bankroll is progressing in size and your bet size is increasing. So those are very important considerations for you to keep in mind here. It's a very important element of bankroll management, and hopefully we do a good job of stressing that here on the show. So still waiting for Brian to call in. I haven't heard anything from him here yet today, so hopefully everything is all right. But, I'll take a quick look here at the NHL card for tonight. This is something I will try to do as we go throughout the season here is look at the NHL card, throw out some of my analysis. And again, you can get very good analysis from Park Michaels over at the website. But for me right now on NHL, and really all, it's a situational handicapping element because it's really tough with the industry that I work in, with the primary focus here, of what our listeners want and the primary focus of the betting market. A lot of times I'm just buried in terms of looking at college football and the NFL. You got the Super Contest to worry about. Got to talk about a lot of different games here with the guests on the show. And of course, I've got college football power ratings. I've got a lot of football writing to do. So unfortunately, right now, I'm not able to keep up with the personnel in the NHL as much as I want to and as much as I'm going to, once we start to transition over to basketball. So what I have to do in terms of looking for NHL edges is I have to use the schedule to my advantage. That's very, very important for me. It's a hallmark of my handicapping. It's something I've talked about here on the show before and something that I've had quite a bit of success with here on these shows and in the articles as well. And you look at tonight's card here, you got Detroit taking on Toronto tonight. And, one of the angles that I look at here in the NHL is when you look at standalone road games. And these are things that can be very tough for teams. They leave home, fly out somewhere, maybe spend a couple nights in a hotel, generally just one night in a hotel, and then fly right back after the game. And sometimes those aren't real great spots for a team. Sometimes those are situations where they just come out flat. They'd rather be at home with their families. They're looking ahead to another home game over the weekend, something like that. In this situation here, you got Detroit and Toronto where, for Detroit, look, they just opened up a new venue, Little Caesars Arena. Very, very exciting development for them. They played a home game on Monday night. They're only their second home game of the season, and they lost that one. And, if you're the Detroit Red Wings here, you've got this brand new arena. You're very excited to be looking to get back to it. Well, you host the Washington Capitals coming up here on Friday night. So it's a standalone road game, a trip up to Toronto. Now, there is another side angle to this game in that Toronto head coach Mike Babcock used to be the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. Jeff Blashill, who took over for him, was the head coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins in the American Hockey League, their primary affiliate. So, when you look at what Blashill was doing with the Griffins, they were trying to emulate what they were doing as much as they could at the NHL level. So these two teams probably aren't that dissimilar in terms of the way that they wanted to run their systems. The biggest difference, though, is that Toronto is just a far more talented hockey team. Much better team offensively, much quicker team. Now, they do give up some defensive weaknesses because of the offensive game that they play. But, again, you look for the situations here. You look for the situational spots and the opportunities that you get coming out of games, going into games, stuff like that. And we've got a situation here with Detroit in a standalone road game spot. Just lost to Tampa Bay at home, but may have been the better team in that game. They were 0 for 6 on the power play, so that was part of the reason why they wound up losing that one. But for Toronto here, you look at what they're doing. They're coming off of a game on the road in Washington, won that game 2-0. That was last night. And Washington is the team that knocked Toronto out of the playoffs last year. Very, very close series, very competitive series, outstanding series. It was great hockey to watch. But Toronto got a little bit of a measure of revenge. Now they come home. Is it a flat spot against Detroit? Is it a flat spot against a team that's probably going to finish the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings? Those are things to look at. Those are things that you have to consider. And, of course, with this being a money line sport, you don't really have the spread to compensate for that. So you wind up in a situation where you have to decide, do I want to play Toronto as a minus 170 favorite here, given the situational angles for both teams, given the talent disparity between the two teams? Those are the decisions that you're faced with in the NHL market on a daily basis. And that's what I like to look to do in that situational article that I have over there. Now, I didn't talk about this game in my situational article, but I did preview it over at bangthebook.com here today between the Chicago Blackhawks and the St. Louis Blues. Front end of a back-to-back for both teams. And that's something that I want to touch on here is that when you get back-to-backs, the backup more often than not is going to play one of those games, especially here early on in the season. Teams are looking to steal some rest for their starting goaltenders. Teams want to make sure that the backup is fresh because they're going to need to rely on that guy at certain points throughout the season. So you get into a situation like tonight. Does Chicago want to use Corey Crawford on the road in St. Louis, or do they want to use Corey Crawford at home against Edmonton tomorrow? Do they want to use Anton Forsberg against St. Louis, a team that knows Corey Crawford quite well? Maybe they feel like they can get some sort of matchup advantage using Forsberg, a guy that St. Louis hasn't seen. Do they want to save Forsberg and use him at home against an Edmonton team missing Leon Draisaitl? Maybe. So those are the decisions that the coaches have to make. But when you get that announcement out there in the betting market, you're going to see a very significant movement on a game if the backup is announced. You're going to be able to know right away. I mean, the second information comes out, you generally find out in the morning skate, depending on which net the goaltender's in. Obviously, whoever's first off the ice is the guy that's going to play in the game tonight. So follow those NHL beat writers. That's a really important thing to do because you won't get behind in the market. I mean, look, if Anton Forsberg is named the starter here tonight for Chicago, I would assume this St. Louis line moves maybe 10 to 12 to 15 cents, something like that, where the Blues go from minus 115, minus 120 up to minus 130, minus 135, because the drop-off between Corey Crawford and Anton Forsberg is fairly significant. We don't know a whole lot about Anton Forsberg. He's only played a few games for the Blue Jackets and then the one game for the Blackhawks. So, people are comfortable betting the quantity that they know. They're comfortable betting the guy that's familiar to them, the guy that they've bet in the past, the guy that they've been able to trust. So in the Chicago-St. Louis game, this line right now would imply that Corey Crawford is your starter. But the books are going to have to adjust very, very quickly, whether it's based on action or just a price adjustment, if Anton Forsberg is named the starter here for this Central Division matchup tonight. So I touched on that a little bit in my preview article today, and again, you can find that over at bangthebook.com. I won't give away my pick here. If you want that, head on over to the website and check that out. Now, you got a spot here with the Montreal Canadiens and the Los Angeles Kings tonight. It's a very obvious spot, and these are things that you have to pay attention to when you get these Eastern Conference teams going out west. A lot of times, these Eastern Conference teams are going to play Los Angeles, Anaheim, and San Jose. Typically, it's going to be a 3 games in 4 night stretch. So for Montreal, they played last night against San Jose, and they take on Anaheim coming up here in a couple of days. So, this is one of those situations where obviously the situational spot is priced into this game. Montreal is not off to a good start at all. They're having all kinds of problems offensively. So they were going to be a fairly sizable dog against the Kings. But the spot, playing a back-to-back out west, that's worth an adjustment out there in the market. So you have to ask yourself as you're looking at this game, is this line right? Is the gap between these two teams plus the situational spot adequately and accurately priced into the line? If the answer is yes, then you probably let it go. If the answer is no, then you decide which one of these sides that you want to play. And also, too, keep in mind here that you run into a situation, again, back-to-back, right? Well, the guy behind Carey Price, the guy who isn't Carey Price, is not as good as Carey Price. And it's not even Carey Price. Maybe the goaltender that means the most to a line here when you talk about the difference between starters and backups. So in a situation like this, where you're probably going to get the backup for Montreal, you have to adjust. You have to make that adjustment, and that probably is priced into the line here. Carey Price, 34 shots, 30 saves yesterday. Not going to go here tonight, I wouldn't think. So that brings Al Montoya into the equation. How big is the drop between Carey Price and Al Montoya? Well, it's pretty significant. And again, part of that is already built into the line. But when you get that final announcement, you're going to see some sort of reaction in the marketplace because you got a lot of guys out there that move the NHL market that are modelers. And that's something that Parker Michaels is. He's got a player grade for each individual player in his NHL power ratings. So when guys are out because of injury, and this is something that Sports Cheetah talked about on Tuesday's show with regards to the NBA, you get into this situation where you can plug and play, see what the new line is, and I guarantee you that when you take Carey Price out and put Al Montoya in, it makes a significant adjustment to the line. So that's the chance that odds makers have to take in terms of putting up a number here on the opening lines in the morning. Hope that their price is right. If you do get the backup announcement, and if you get the starter announcement, can you adjust the price quickly enough? Because even Carey Price on a back-to-back, even with all the data that we have out there about goaltenders on back-to-backs, and it's really not good. But Carey Price is still a guy that people are going to say, okay, well, it's Carey Price. They'll have some controls built in for the back-to-back, but when those model guys put Carey Price into this Montreal lineup, this number's not plus 145. Even with him on a back-to-back, it's probably down more like 135, 130, something like that. So the books have to adjust. And really, I'll say this. When it comes to the NHL, I think that there's, and this is just me speculating here, I'm not entirely sure, and if there is anyone that is sure out there, please feel free to let me know. But when I look at the NHL market, to me, I think there's a very small number of guys that have a significant amount of influence. I think when it comes to college football and the NFL and the NBA and college basketball, you just have more people involved, more people invested, and more sharp guys in those markets. There are a lot of sharp guys that can do college football in the NBA that don't do the NHL or don't do Major League Baseball. They're not as comfortable with the money line sports. So you've got a small group of people that has a significant influence on the NHL betting market. So whatever those guys say kind of goes here, and the books will adjust accordingly to that. So when you start to see moves here in the NHL, you can assume that a lot of them are very, very razor sharp in nature. You don't get a lot of public involvement in the NHL relative to the other sports, and public money is not really going to move the NHL needle too much. So when you see moves, they are 100% worth paying attention to. Does that mean that you have to follow them? No, not necessarily. If you see a game where you feel like the edge is different and it's moving in an opposite direction of what you expected, go ahead and play it. It's one of those things where if you're managing your bankroll properly, if you're betting 1%, 2%, 3% of your bankroll, you got a little bit of margin for error there when it comes to learning about these markets, when it comes to learning about how to bet some of these different sports. If you're not real good at the NHL, but you want to get good at the NHL, I think the NHL is a great market. I think the NHL is a market that you can tap into and that you can have success with as long as you're informed and you understand the value in money line numbers. I think, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. Put yourself out there. Give yourself a chance to learn something new. Because one of the things that you have to consider here is that, and I realize a lot of people are just doing this as a supplement. A lot of people are doing this for fun, doing it to have some investment in the games. But I'm sure that there are some listeners out there that would eventually want to become the next Sports Cheetah, would eventually want to be a professional bettor like Brian Leonard or Brad Powers or something like that. Well, unless you can kill it in a couple of specific markets, you have to have a very diversified sports betting portfolio. And if you can include the NHL, if you can find a way, to hit those plus money dogs or hit those short money line favorites and, set yourself up to make a little bit of extra coin from doing that, that's going to help you so much because not only does it improve your NHL handicapping, but it gives you a better idea of a money line sports betting market like Major League Baseball. It gives you a better idea of playing money lines in the NBA or college hoops or college football or the NFL. Everything that you do, has carryover to the other markets that are out there. Obviously, the sports are different. The betting angles are different. The statistics are different. I understand that. But from an understanding of the sports betting market perspective, being diversified, having the ability to understand what things mean in different markets is so critical. It's so huge. And I think the NHL market is a good test case and a good example of that because there aren't a whole lot of people tapping into that market. So It's just one of those things where I've found that the NHL market to me presents some really good opportunities. It's something that I've tried to dig into here a little bit more. And again, like I said, I wish I could do more with it, but with the focus on football still at this point in the game, I'm kind of limited with what I can do from an NHL standpoint. That being said, once we get into bowl season and I've got some more time to look at the NHL, and then of course, once we turn over the calendar to 2018, that's when I really start digging deep into the NHL, really start looking for some good opportunities. So, hopefully I can bring some of that insight here to the shows. But let's look at a few matchups here on Thursday. And of course, we're recording this on Wednesday morning, so we don't have NHL lines for those games. But again, some really good situational opportunities that are out there in the marketplace. Let's go ahead and start with the St. Louis Blues. I mentioned they play tonight against the Chicago Blackhawks. That's a huge game for them. It always means a little bit more. Play close geographic rivals, and you play teams that are within your division. So for St. Louis, max effort tonight. They're going to be fully invested in this game. Now, tomorrow night, the St. Louis Blues take on the Colorado Avalanche, and they will do it on the road in Denver in the altitude. And one of the biggest problems for the Avalanche last season is that they just didn't take advantage of their home ice advantage. They were a very, very bad team. They were an awful team. Now, there are a couple of caveats about that. The first is that Jared Bednar took over this team, I think 3 or 4 weeks before the start of the season. It was a very late announcement with Patrick Waugh not coming back as the head coach. So Bednar kind of had to scramble a little bit, didn't know a whole lot about his personnel. He was coming off of a Calder Cup winning season with the Lake Erie Monsters. So, the dude can coach. But Colorado was ravaged by injuries. He took the job so late that it was hard for him to incorporate his systems. And to incorporate your systems on the fly as a first-year head coach, very, very challenging thing to do. So Colorado here so far this year, already 2-0 at home, playing much better hockey, playing much better defensive hockey, still struggling on special teams, which is a sign of the lack of talent on this hockey club. But they are in a prime spot here against St. Louis. They're trying to rebuild that home ice advantage in the altitude. They're catching St. Louis in a back-to-back. You should be able to get Colorado at plus money on Thursday night. Those are the spots that you can look for without knowing a whole lot about the personnel. You know that St. Louis is generally a better team than Colorado. That's completely true. St. Louis has made the playoffs 7 straight seasons. But the spot here is a great equalizer for the Avalanche. And again, those are the spots that you want to look for. Those are the situations that you want to try to isolate here in the NHL betting market. And there are some really good opportunities to do that. Let's look at another one here. New Jersey Devils take on the Ottawa Senators. Devils in a standalone road spot here. They hosted Tampa Bay on Tuesday night, went to Ottawa on Thursday night, and then they'll come right back home to face the San Jose Sharks on Friday. So you got a back-to-back standalone road game, and the Ottawa Senators are kind of a mess right now. They are 3-1-2 on the season, but they have all kinds of injuries. They've had some significant problems to their starting lineup. There's a lot of guys banged up in and out of the lineup, day to day, out, especially on defense. They've got a lot of guys that are banged up on defense. And those model guys that are out there dictating the market based on the lineups that they have, they may bring Ottawa down a little bit in this spot. And who can blame them? I mean, Ottawa coming into this season was a team that people pegged for regression off of an Eastern Conference Finals run last year because they were a really average team in the regular season. So a lot of people came into the year looking at the Senators saying, okay, this is a team that I want to go against. This is a team that I'm looking to go against when I get the right opportunities. New Jersey, on the other hand, off to a 5-1 start. They were the biggest surprise in the National Hockey League here so far, I would say, outside of the Vegas Golden Knights, who are also 5-1 in their inaugural season. But this is one of those spots that's really, really tough for New Jersey on Thursday night. Standalone road game, sandwiched between home games against two pretty good teams in Tampa Bay and San Jose. How motivated are they? How invested are they? They're playing very well. People are already looking for regression out of them. Big difference between Corey Schneider and the backup there. So it's one of those things where you kind of start weighing all these situations, then determine if the price point is something that you like. And by the way, for San Jose here, as I mentioned, they're playing on Friday night in New Jersey. This will be San Jose's first road game of the season. Season started October 4th. San Jose playing its first road game on October 20th. So we've played 16 days of the regular season, and the Sharks are just now playing a road game. So that is absolutely incredible to look at here from a situational betting standpoint. And again, those are the things that you want to look for. Those are the opportunities that you want to try to isolate out there in the NHL betting market. All right, well, it looks like Brian Leonard's not going to be able to join us today. Hopefully everything is okay with him. I'll go ahead and talk about some of the things that I wanted to touch on here with him. One of the things that we talked about on Tuesday's show with Sports Cheetah is that we were trying to figure out which side to adjust if you're looking at your power ratings and you wind up being 4 or 5 points off on a game, if your line just happens to be way off. And I like what Cheetah said yesterday, and I presume Brian would have echoed these sentiments as well, is that if you're 4 to 5 points off and it's an isolated game, it is what it is. Sometimes you can be off. It just happens. Maybe there's an injury that you missed, something like that. If you're consistently off on the same team, and Bowling Green, as I mentioned as an example on yesterday's show, is one of those teams here for me at this point in the year, then I'm obviously rating Bowling Green incorrectly. And that's something you need to be perceptive about when it comes to your own power ratings. You always want to be grading against the close. You always want to be tinkering and evaluating your power ratings on a week-by-week basis as games finish up. So if you're off 4 to 5 points, and it's because you've been off on Bowling Green each of the last 3 weeks, that's your problem. Maybe you're off on both teams. Maybe you make, if you're off by 5 points on a game, maybe you wind up bumping each team 2.5 points. Well, that can be a little bit dangerous because you may have adjusted the wrong team. You get into a situation when openers come out for the following week, you're off 2.5 points on somebody else. And that's the hard part of power ratings. You can go back, look at the closing numbers for teams and start to evaluate and see, was my number here, was my number there? That's important to do. But for a lot of people, they're novices with power ratings, much like myself. I've done them for a few years. I didn't do them last year, so I was starting from, basically the ground up here this season. And that is one of the things that I have had a problem with, is determining, okay, I'm off by 6 points on this game. Am I off 4 points on this team, 4 points on that team? Should I do 3 and 3? Am I 6 points off on this team? That is something you kind of have to work with a little bit. And it's not a bad thing if you have to make a pretty big adjustment to a team to just not touch that opener. Maybe your number's off, but don't touch it. Don't add a loser to your card if you've got a team misvalued. That's a really important process as a handicapper, is understanding the games that you just shouldn't or can't bet. I know we want to have a lot of action. I know it's exciting to put that bankroll in play and have a lot of things to follow. You're out at Home Depot or whatever checking scores while your wife's looking at plants or something like that. I get it. I understand it. That distraction is something that we all embrace, all appreciate, all want to have. But the nice thing is, when it comes to college football, you have a lot of games that you can look to play. So maybe you don't have a team adjusted properly. Take note of that line, make the adjustment, and see what your number comes out next week. See if you've got that team right the following week. See if you can make a play on that team or against that team the following week. It's very important to be doing this and tinkering with this as you go throughout the season. And for those that don't have power ratings, maybe you just had a number in mind. Let's say you look at this Iowa Northwestern game. Let's say you were thinking Northwestern would be a 3-point favorite. And they're not. They're a 1.5 point home dog here. We saw this line flip over to the Northwestern side early in the week. Now in the middle of the week, it's gone back over to the Iowa side. And you were thinking this number would be -3. You were thinking 3 for Northwestern at home. These teams are pretty equal. I don't think anyone would fault you for that perspective, for that point of view. But the line's not there. So do you play Northwestern? If you do, and they cover, that's great. Then your -3 was probably a better number than what was out there in the market. If they don't, you still have to make that adjustment in your mind. You still have to, even if you don't have it quantified in a power rating standpoint or something like that, you still have to think to yourself, okay, maybe I was off a few points on Northwestern. And then you adjust accordingly. You look at their line for next week's game and say, okay, I had this game at, whatever it is. If I was off by 3 points, maybe it should be here. And believe me, even if you don't take the time to do power ratings, even if you don't take the time to update power ratings, as long as you're thinking in these terms, as long as you're following along with the market, making some of those mental adjustments, it's going to help you. Whether it helps you in terms of winning more bets or in terms of losing fewer bets, those are both good things. So you just want to make sure that you maintain that proper perspective and adjust these teams accordingly.